I'm Will, one of the 7 registrars, and I'd like to present some of my recent work into Cauda equina syndrome. Traditional teaching places great emphasis on certain red flag features because there's some evidence that recovery correlates with timely diagnosis, prompt investigation, and early surgical decompression. In 2018, the British Association of Spinal Surgeons issued standards of care which explicitly say that patients presenting with either back or sciatic pain with the additional red flag features of bladder, bowel, or sensory saddle disturbance should be suspected as having Cauda equina syndrome. The aims of the study were twofold: to determine the quantity of referrals seen by the on-call orthopaedic team for suspected Cauda equina, and to determine the value of each clinical characteristic when predicting MRI-confirmed compression. We reviewed every electronic take list over a 1-year period to identify relevant referrals and excluded those who were not investigated with urgent MRI scan. Electronic notes were reviewed for each clinical characteristic. In the 1-year period, the orthopaedic team saw almost 400 referrals for suspected CES, with 85% of those going on for urgent MRI scan and 7% of those scans confirming compression. This table shows the sensitivity and specificity values for each clinical characteristic, which were arranged in descending order of statistical association. The further the odds value above 1, the stronger this association, and the lower the p-value, the less likely that this is due to chance. As you might expect, bilateral sciatica, which is one of the traditionally taught red flags for Cauda equina, shows comparatively good sensitivity and specificity values when predicting the condition. A statistically strong association is demonstrated by an odds ratio of over 5 and a significantly low p-value. However, above it in the top position, lower limb weakness, which isn't traditionally emphasized as a red flag, showed similarly good sensitivity and specificity values, an even higher odds ratio, and a similarly significant p-value. Leg sensory deficits, again, are not traditionally emphasized as a red flag, but showed good sensitivity and specificity values when predicting the condition, backed up by an odds ratio of 3.8 and a low p-value. Reflex abnormalities, an abnormal PR examination, bowel disturbance, back pain, and bladder disturbance all failed to gain statistical significance and fell to the lower end of the table. Interestingly, unilateral sciatica was shown to be a statistically significant protective characteristic. This study demonstrates that our centre sees a high volume of referrals for suspected Cauda equina syndrome, and that the diagnostic accuracy of some conventional red flags, for example bladder or bowel disturbance or PR abnormality, is low, while other clinical characteristics such as lower limb sensory or motor deficits is much higher. Finally, we note that prior review by the orthopaedic team rarely changes the fact that these patients go on for urgent MRI, and to that end, a new pathway is being developed which may allow for a more direct pathway to scanning. Thanks for your time, and I'll be grateful for any questions.